So good morning, everyone. My name is Tonje Tingberg. I'm the Health in Emergency Coordinator at Norwegian Red Cross. I've been invited here together with Einar from Microsoft and Richard Campbell from the Humanitarian Toolbox. We will tell three different stories. I will start with telling a little bit about how we in Norwegian Red Cross and in the International Federation have been working on developing a program which we call community-based surveillance. It's basically using technology to early detect potential outbreaks that could lead to a larger epidemics. This all started in 2012, where I was deployed together with some colleagues of mine from Geneva to Sierra Leone. We were asked to support the National Society to establish what we called oral rehydration points, which is basically a first aid post for cholera, early treatment of cholera. So we trained about 800 volunteers in managing those first aid posts. But what we also did is that we trained them in registering how many people used that first aid post and how many who was presented with symptoms of cholera, and how many people who was referred to the health facilities. What we didn't have at that time, that we didn't have the means to get that information in real time. We didn't have any tools because this was in hard-to-reach community. It was far away from the existing health facilities, and it could take several hours to either walk or go by motorbike to those communities. So what we did during that time is that we were trying to search desperately to find some technical tools that we could provide us that information, which we didn't succeed in that. But we equipped about 40 of those rehydration points with a mobile phone that we called to just to check up how they actually managed to detect an escalation of the outbreak. The findings from that was quite positive. We found that actually only of all of those people who was using the first aid post, only 5% was referred to the national health facilities and then included in the national surveillance data. That means that the epidemic was much larger than we anticipated. That also means that in some of the hotspots where we had the first aid post, actually it was more sick people there than we actually knew, and that encouraged us to go further in developing a methodology on how the Red Cross could actually use technology in emergency response to have a better or more efficient support to the beneficiaries who was affected by an epidemic. So basically, it was to move from paper to mobile phones at that time. Right after that year after we came back from Sierra Leone, we were working on that methodology, and then I was approached by Haitian Red Cross, who wanted to play a role in the eradication campaign for cholera in Haiti. Cholera in Haiti is one of the largest outbreaks that we've seen in the world, and the access to healthcare is very difficult for a lot of people living there. Actually, this is a picture of where we had the project, where it took us 3 hours by car and then 2 hours to walk to get to this community. So that's how difficult the access can be in a situation like this. The Haitian Red Cross so they asked me, is there any new tools that we can contribute with? And I told them about our experience in Sierra Leone, and they were they said that we are interested to try this. So we had our first pilot of what we call community-based surveillance in Haiti. It was an 18-month pilot project. We trained 240 volunteers. We sent about 4,500 SMS reports. And what this pilot showed us is that they had a proof of concept. We saw that volunteers were able, because volunteers often are not healthcare professionals, but we trained them in detecting a potential outbreak of cholera at that point. And they did that, and they initiated response. So it was a proof of concept for an early warning system that could lead to an early action. how we did that is that we used, so there's a lot of data collection tool out there. So we used Magpie as a data collection tool. We knew that we couldn't, we had to use basic mobile phones because of the connectivity or the coverage. The volunteers sent an SMS into the Magpie online database, and then we had support from an epidemiologist who knew how to run our scripts. And he developed that for us to enable us to have a more visual report that we could both, it was easy for us to read and was easy for the volunteers to read, and it was also easy to share with the national health authorities. They could be included into the surveillance data. Then the Ebola happened. Since we are the one who has been part of this development, are also emergency responder, we were deployed to the Ebola. During the peak of the outbreak, we were very busy on being at the Ebola treatment centers, but we saw that there was a huge need to engage in the communities both due to the fear of that the people had to use the health facility, but also so they were hiding in the communities, and there was a need there to start both to detect potential new outbreaks of Ebola in the communities, but also to start an early response. In Sierra Leone, what that learned us is that here we moved away from the R script. We used the same reporting function, so we used Magpie by mobile phones here as well. But our script was for us, who is healthcare professional, too complicated for us to use. So we moved into business or to the BI tool, and we used Tableau instead here. What this experience showed us is that we were able to make this program up to scale. So we trained here about 2,500 volunteers who reported on a daily basis when the epidemic was ongoing. However, we were not happy. What we saw also as well is that we didn't have a good alert function. We didn't have a good communication with the volunteers at that point of time. So our next experience was actually now in Madagascar, where Norwegian Red Cross has a health program targeting areas which is affected by plague every year. It's on a plateau in the highlands in Madagascar. There's also a hard-to-reach community, and it's also very limited surveillance to actually get into the national surveillance data. And for plague, it's important that you detect that quite quickly and initiate response immediately, because you just have a small window of opportunity to treat specific plague cases. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about this, how it is. So we used all our experience that we had from previous versions here. But what we did is that we actually moved from only SMS and a visual report into a dashboard. So we had a better volunteer registration, we had a better event detection and reporting, and we had an automatic alert function that could initiate a more efficient or quicker on-site response. And the data consumption and analysis was also improved a bit better. Just to show you here. So here we moved away again from Tableau. We went into Power BI, and the reason for that is that Power BI is in all the Red Cross computers, so it's more sustainable for us to use that. And this is just to show how the dashboard looked like. And we could also access both. It was only a few people who has access to the actual Power BI because of the legal aspect of collecting data which is related to health. But for public, it was available to see an overall. The website shows what we do and what's happening in the community, but it doesn't visualize sensitive data. However, this was actually, we didn't find the system that we were happy with, so we got support from an IT person because the one who's working on this, we're only health professionals. We are not IT people. So we got support and told him that, oh, we need this and this and this and this, and can you please help us make this and see if that is working? As you maybe not for you, but for me, this is quite complicated. This is how we see it still is not a very user-friendly system for us. It still built on many components. So the first part of the system is the collection of data. So how it goes into the we wanted to test another data collection tool. So we moved from Magpie into Segeba, which could be another data collection tool as well. But here we're using in Madagascar, we're using that. The first part there is how we collected the data via a very basic SMS, basic phone, and then it was transferred into the Azure cloud, where the designer published the report into the Power BI and into the cloud, and then the next slide is also showing that how it was visual both inside the Power BI and on the web. So what is our main learning points from these three experiences is that setting up and running a system like this still is quite resource heavy. It's challenging for those who implement this in the field to maintain it, and that's one of our biggest concerns. How do we develop a system which is sustainable and can be maintained and has a support function? And how do we develop a system which can be used in multiple contexts by multiple users? Just to put it into a context for you is that we are now the methodology around community-based surveillance is now being proven to be an effective tool to detect outbreak, but the technology is still a little bit behind for us to go at the global scale. We are currently thinking about for the next year to add community-based surveillance into existing health programs in at least 5 to 10 countries, and to be able to have that, we need to have a better system. It needs to be much more flexible, so we can have more drag and drop, so you can easily be deployed to an emergency if there's a new outbreak situation, or if there's an area where we are moving into the epidemic season. So you can drag and drop it for the different diseases or different events that you need to survey for. It needs also to be much better, more interactivity with the volunteers. So what we learned is that the alert function, so setting a threshold, for example, in Madagascar we also survey for acute watery diarrhea, and in a community we have a threshold level there that initiate a response. That is a new function which we didn't have in Sierra Leone or in Haiti, and we've seen that is very helpful for the volunteers, but it's not automatically enough in Madagascar either. It doesn't provide a good feedback loop to the volunteers. That's also something that we're looking at. So we made a technical evaluation of the setup in Madagascar, and we have also written a functionality description of the next version of what we call CBS, which we want to, as I said, improve the interactivity with the user. We want to have a better alert generation, and we want to have a better information sharing, both with the public but also with the national health authorities. Where are we and what's next? Norwegian Red Cross has ever since the beginning of this project worked very, very closely with our secretariat in Geneva, so for the International Federation of Red Cross, and we will strengthen that even more now by having a joint project. So we are now moving from being 3 people to being a much larger group, which is combined with both people sitting here in Oslo, in Geneva, and also in Nairobi. So expand the global team, which will have also more technical people to set the whole seen on how the Red Cross want to use this as a tool for the future. We want to continue. There's a lack of evidence of doing that. So the three pilots that we've done has shown us that this has huge potential, but there's limited scientific evidence out there. So we want to generate that for the next period, and that's also why we want to develop first a version 2 and then move into a version 3 and version 4 and version 5 and version 6 based on the evaluation of the implementation. There is a huge demand from our partner National Society who wants to implement this. So it feels like we have we are on a lack of time. We should have had this ready yesterday. So yeah, this is where we are now, and I will say thank you for your attention, and I will give the word to Einar.
Okay, let's see. So, thank you, Tonje. Red Cross came to us, I said, like 4 or 5 months ago? Yeah. And basically presented this. I was in a stressful moment. I had lots of stuff to do, and I didn't know what to actually expect from this. Gave pretty much the same presentation, and I was like, whoa, we have to help. We really have to help this. At Microsoft, we have the thing with philanthropies, where we actually, organizations like Red Cross actually get Azure consumption for free. So that was kind of also already done. And at Microsoft, we also get 3 days, every employee of Microsoft get 3 days to actually do things like this. And my line of work being a technical evangelist, I can also do kind of more because it's relevant for the work that I do. So I just found this project really, really interesting, and my immediate thought went to actually Richard Campbell, who's been running the Humanitarian Toolbox, and I reached out to him pretty early and got in touch with the guys doing this, both Richard, and then he pointed me to Jim McGowan in Red Cross America, and had kind of walked through what they've been doing and tried to model both an architecture and a process for moving this forward. So you basically going into this, we have to set up kind of clear goals. And obviously, Red Cross have clear goals. And we wanted to kind of build on that. So Red Cross does not have developers. They're not a development organization. So we have to take that into consideration from day one. How do we do this? How do we build something, build it smart, reduce the cost, because it can be very costly building software. It can be also very risky building software. Everyone in the room here probably agree with me, right? It's both costly and risky. So we need to build something that is seriously sustainable for the next like 10, 15 years or more, something that we can build on. So Tonje mentioned the version 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We really have to build for that scenario. So going into this, we need to consider quality. So it probably needs at least one unit test, right? At least. And obviously, they wanted this to be built as fast as possible because this is serious stuff, right? People are actually dying if they don't get these tools out into the field. So other things that we had to keep in mind is, as Tonje also mentioned, provisioning. They had to run new countries, and it has to be smooth getting a new country up and running. And also when kind of some of these things has seasonality to it. So there's outbreaks. They know when these outbreaks typically start and when they end. So how can we actually take the system and put it in a kind of dormant state and just save the data and make sure that we have it for the next time? And also going into all these different countries with different data governance legislations and all that, we have to really take that into consideration as well. It cannot necessarily only live in the cloud because, well, we only have data centers in so many places of the world. So we really had to take that into consideration as well. So coming up with an architecture for that is, with all those things in mind, well, This is the kind of core principles we were looking at. We wanted to go small to reduce risk. Basically, build the smallest problems that we can think of, enabling us to actually go to smaller teams, right? It's easier to build smaller things than larger things. So come up with a good way to do that. So base it off of things like domain-driven design, and really going into identifying the different bounded contexts and understand the different bounded contexts, and that's your kind of division. That's the team division that we get, the silos, right? So how do you pull all that back together? How do you build the composition from this? Again, reducing risk and thinking about that. Event-driven architecture seems like a good thing to think of. So we'll basically bring the different bounded contexts together by having well-known events being the contract between them. And this should then help us improve the throughput, because now we have autonomous teams, autonomous bounded contexts that actually can go forward on their own, and improving the throughput and the velocity of the project. And of course, we need to automate this. I mentioned that one unit test that we need, and really follow up with that, because we need to deliver the quality. There's not going to be a big support organization for this that can actually respond quickly, right? Red Cross does not have that. So we really have to keep in mind that everything has to be automated and kind of guarantee as much quality as we can for the entire thing. So the next thing we kind of looked at is, okay, how do we actually host this? So we wanted to go in and do Docker-based, basically. And enabling, well, actually, I took out one point here, but we said also kind of just do it with Linux at the core and Docker on top, basically enabling us freedom, right? Again, a point of reducing risk, because we want to be able to bring anyone into this project. So it's not just .NET developers or anything like that, it's everyone, right? Bringing in like Java developers, Node developers, Ruby developers, anyone. And with the Docker or container-based approach, we will enable that scenario. Anyone can work on this project, enabling us to go out and find resources much easier. We want this to be held in a registry with a strict versioning strategy, enabling us to actually have full control over the release cycle. And with this, we do need some kind of orchestrator. And doing something like Azure Container Service with Kubernetes enables us to have all these workloads in a cluster and governed by an orchestrator like Kubernetes. So diving into the bounded context, they pretty much define this themselves. And this is what we tend to do in software development. We find these different modules, right? We all build modules in our systems. Even our monoliths have bounded context. We just don't call them that. So the modules that Red Cross already defined are natural bounded contexts. They've already defined the different workflows they need to capture. So taking these, we can come up with the architecture that fits those bounded contexts. So looking more deeply into it, so obviously this is very high-level stuff. We don't have time to go in depth on everything, but taking the volunteer registration, we basically want to be able to have some sort of mobile front end that enables them to do all that registration, all the volunteers and all that stuff coming in, and natural to have a kind of API endpoint and also provide a web front end where they can manage all these things. So they have the volunteers coming in with the mobile, but they want to manage the kind of rights and kind of roles and whatnot from another web front end. And well, Cosmos DB is just kind of just thrown in there, but a document database is what we're thinking of. And using something like the MongoDB API enables us to go with Cosmos, but also kind of on an on-premise thing as well, because we want to be enabling the scenario of having the data not necessarily only in the cloud. And having the event-driven thinking at the center of this, so anything that happens will be published to something like an event hub or a message broker of some sort, service bus, you name it. And enabling us to actually have something that translates that from this bounded context to a different bounded context. That's called a mediator. something that mediates between the different bounded contexts. Looking at the next, similar, but this time, well, the ingestion is from a SMS, right? We want to be able to capture SMSs, but it's kind of similar thing. We capture that with events. We can have something that processes these events. Could be Azure Functions, could be something completely different. Again, we store it in a database, but we also go even further. We can transform that event into something else that we can use for, say, machine learning. Let's say we want to capture and see and predict things. Why not use machine learning for that? And obviously also, here's where the alerts system would come into play and actually notify the user, and the user being the healthcare worker saying there's something going on. You need to actually respond based on the thresholds configured. And also visualize the whole thing in something like Power BI. But again, publishing to other contexts is important. So again, another mediator that will actually deal with translating to a different bounded context. And another one would be very similar to the first one, being the kind of place where you go and set up all the thresholds and whatnot. So again, the same kind of pattern, same kind of thinking, but in isolation. And the last bit being the analysis part, where we actually can take data from all the different bounded contexts and actually take that into here, and again, publish it to another place and process it, store it, put it into Power BI, enabling Power BI desktop at this place where we want to publish reports, because we want them to be able to quite easily, without a developer's hand, to actually create reports. So utilize existing tools for that and just publishing that through a web front end. So that's pretty much what we're looking at there. Important part of this is obviously security. So one thing is the security around the data, and looking at like hybrid solutions where we need to keep the data probably on-premise for some parts. But also, how do we actually log into this? How do we authenticate and then authorize the different APIs and all that stuff? Well, we need that to be standardized, because we need to be able to actually enable different scenarios. So not only like Azure AD, they have their own, Red Cross have their own Azure AD using Office 365 and stuff like that, but also enabling other things, because out in the field, they are not necessarily in that AD, right? So enabling the field workers to log in through other social providers like this. And maybe even go all the way down to custom login kind of a username and password database that we maintain in this system. Bringing in something like Identity Server would be perfect for that, and still be on the OpenID part of this, right? It's completely standardized. So another thing is I want to bring up is I've been doing a framework for close to 10 years, and it kind of captures all this. And if you want to read more about all the kind of different patterns and all how to do this, I would recommend you go to this place and have a look at the different articles and videos and whatnot, because it kind of just explains it in more technical detail rather than me trying to do that on stage today. So moving to process. Process is probably the hardest part in this, I would say, because, as I mentioned, Red Cross don't have developers. So how do we develop this? And there's a big beta sticker there, because we don't have the answers. But Red Cross is considering doing a few things, and based on our recommendations, basically, from Microsoft. And what we're recommending is, what if we base the whole development on volunteers? You guys. What if you can contribute to this on your spare time, if you have any? Maybe your employers will give you a day here and there and actually help out on this, because this is important stuff, right? So that's what we're kind of working on. Red Cross is in a process of kind of looking at doing a risk assessment around this. Is this feasible? Is this something that we can do? And of course, then we would be doing everything in the open. Everything would be on GitHub. we would have a pull request regime for this. So there would be a team that actually does code reviews and stuff like that. And also try to come up with a plan for doing like a regular community stand-up where people who want to be involved in this come in and actually have a chat. And we have natural product owners in Red Cross governing the different things they want to build. So that is kind of what we were looking for this project. So that's a great potential for building it fast, and also reducing risk, because then there would be lots of people involved, right? So the natural part of this is having product owners. We need product owners. Red Cross is the product owners. Tonje is a natural one. And they would own the whole thing. They would own the backlog. And this is also from the work that you guys have been doing at Humanitarian Toolbox, is the Red Cross guys knows what they need, right? So it's natural for them to actually own this. So it's somewhat different what you see in a lot of other open source projects where it's tech-oriented, right? This is not tech-oriented. So we need natural product owners. And we also need to build a team of architects and someone that owns the vision, the development vision. So it needs to be, well, I'm saying at least 2 persons, I would say more, right? 3, 4 people that actually have the overview, the global vision for the product being built. And they kind of govern this. So again, it's about reducing risk, because we don't want just that one guy that has this and all of a sudden has a busy week and can't respond to anything. So we need to be able to scale this. So part of this is also documentation. And we hate documentation, right? We have to do this, right? If you're going into this place and into this space, you need to kind of do documentation. You need to document everything that you do so the next guy can actually pick it up. Because if we get this done right, there will be people all over the globe actually contributing to this project. So obviously we need the next guy coming in to have a quick read and understand what to do. So that's important. And GitHub Issues is one of many places, many things that we could do for documentation, but also everything that we do. What if we can automate that and generate documentation that becomes publicly available, use Markdown and things like that to generate proper documentation for this. We need to have automated builds, obviously, continuously integrating the whole thing, running tests. We need a bunch of them to guarantee that we're actually not breaking stuff and delivering what we need. And as I mentioned, publish the documentation continuously. And since we talk about containers, we need to kind of build the container images and publish these to registers versioned every time we do things. So that's super important. And for the community part, what if we can do hackathons, codathons, where we actually gather people in the room and work together for a couple of days. We come there with a clear goal set by our product owners, saying, this is what we need built. These are the issues that we really need to focus on now. So obviously we need some pre-event planning for that to happen. And hand out assignments. So if we're lucky enough to get enough people in the room, maybe there's multiple teams actually working on different parts. Give them assignments and build it. And also follow up after such an event with who will do what, because the chances are we're not going to do everything at the event, so we need to actually follow up after that. And basically from the work that the guys at Humanitarian Toolbox has been doing, kind of build on that experience and see, well, they've been doing this for a couple of years now, and build on that experience. Really share that experience. And yeah, I think that's a perfect segue to you, Richard.
Thank you, Einar. Little did I know when you pinged me about a little over a year ago about this, that I'd end up here. So next time I'll be more careful answering my email. How many folks here are Norwegian? They're in the room right now, just out of curiosity. Most of you, okay. And I hope you're proud of what a relatively small arm of the Red Cross is able to do. I'm a Canadian. I live beside this big beast next door. And we like punching above our weight too, and I hope you do as well, because I just get chills when I think about how much a small group of dedicated people can move the ball forward, can make this world a little bit of a better place and actually save some lives. Most of the software we build on any given day it's just not that exciting, is it? You know, forms over data, helping somebody fill in an insurance form or get some work done, that's fine. This is software that makes a difference in whether or not a child lives or dies, or that we actually know where to get medicine to, where to put expertise into, and to make sure that those precious volunteer hours are well spent. There's lots of different kinds of volunteerism. It takes a special person to go to Sierra Leone or to Haiti or to Madagascar to go on the ground and do those sorts of things. But I value the volunteers that we get at Humanitarian Toolbox too, who take time out of their lives to write software to make those people more effective. And that's the job we've always had as software developers. We rarely do the work that gets the results, but we do build the tools that allow those people that do that work to be much more effective. We amplify them. And so we can do that in a volunteer basis as well. It would be interesting if we could all make our living or live our lives working on only this kind of software. It's not practical or necessarily realistic. A few of us may. But for each of us to have a part of our lives, a part of our day in citizenship to the world, that we take this skill, this superpower we have to writing software, and apply it to a bigger problem than the one immediately in front of us, into something that gets better over time. I ended up making HTBox because I wasn't satisfied with the mechanism necessary to allow a volunteer developer to use their time well. We only have so many hours. It's the only really limited resource we have. How do we do the most with that time? And so this is a mechanism built around making it simple for you to use your skill. I don't have a problem with volunteer developers. I can find a lot of them. It helps to have a podcast that people listen to, so that when I can shout it, so let's go build some software and make a difference in the world, people are like, yes. My gate is good work items. It's project management, actually. But that's a good use of resource, that we can spend our time to actually pull together well thought out work items. I do enjoy the open source community. We have a great time together. Most of the stuff that we do in open source is by us, for us. Tooling to improve our ability to write code and to build better projects, so forth. These kinds of projects are different, and you'll see they're shaped differently too if you look at them. Because most of the time when you're talking about working on an open source project, when you're looking at AutoFac or AutoMapper or SEC or any of those types of tooling around development, they're generally led by a Nicholas Blumhardt or a Jimmy Bogart, a person with a vision who drives a particular piece forward, has written the majority of the software and appreciates your contributions to do more. We don't have single leaders for a project of this nature. We have experts that are on the ground doing the work and need the software to be better. And then we do project management to figure out what that work looks like, break it down into items that someone can pick up and execute on. And if you look at the contributions in GitHub for a project in HTBox, you'll see that there's a collective. We run codeathons to get people excited about our projects. We expect, our goal, if you come to a codeathon for Humanitarian Toolbox, is you'll have a couple of check-ins over the next couple of days. That will teach you about a project, will get you excited about a project, you'll be able to pick something up and add to it. But my real goal in getting you to my codeathon is to get you hooked on building software that saves lives, so that you'll keep coming back and keep contributing. And if you look at our projects, you'll see a group of addicts. This is one of their favorite things. I had a team of 3 developers come in Wisconsin. They used to go bowling on Wednesdays. Now they write code. They work on Already, and I see them every Wednesday with a couple of check-ins. They're continuing to work on that piece over and over and over again. And so you'll see that the folks that really get hooked on it, they keep making contributions. And there's about a dozen for the Already project that have 50, 60, 100 check-ins now. And we have weekly Google Hangouts where it's essentially a Scrum session that you can hop on, chat with folks. We do it early in the morning, West Coast time, so the folks in Europe, it's in the evening. It's not in the middle of the night for anybody who's contributing. But we can talk about where we are, what problems we have. I leverage my best skills so that I can facilitate those folks being productive, and I'll give you an example of that. As we were tackling the time zone problem, because the software is being used in more and more places, dates and times are harder than they look. We were looking for the right library to use, and what did we find? We found Note-A-Time. Note-A-Time is not for the faint of heart. And as the boys were struggling to understand how to use Note-A-Time, I said, I could just call John Skeet. So I called John Skeet, and he dropped in on our Slack channel and spent a half an hour and got us straightened out. So we're using Note-A-Time the right way. And believe it or not, John was very grateful because he cares a lot about that library. He wants to make it better, and being able to talk to developers who really need to use it and are struggling with it helps him make a better library too. So I feel like I'm my best self when I can connect those people together and build the best software we possibly can build. We all have different roles in how we can build these things and make a difference. If you're able to focus on it full time, I'm excited for you. There's lots to do. If you can give me one weekend a month, if we can talk to your employer and build a corporate citizenship program about how your entire development team once a quarter can spend a weekend building software, I can help you with that too. There are ways for us to routinely contribute, to sort of charge ourselves around software, around this superpower that we have, and do more with it. And I would reference Daniel Pink's Drive. I highly encourage you reading the book, because it speaks to this idea that in a creative enterprise like software development, there's really three things that matter long term that really dictate our own happiness in our careers: autonomy, mastery, and purpose. And I think with efforts like what the Norwegian Red Cross is working on, what Einar has poured his soul into, and what we've been doing at Humanitarian Toolbox, we try and address those three things. Autonomy, your ability to choose what you do and how you do it. That's what volunteerism is all about. That's why people volunteer. It's why people contribute to open source projects. I choose what to do. Mastery, that I press against the edges of my skills, that I want to get better, that I work on different things in different ways to grow in my profession and in my life. And purpose, that the stuff that I make matters. So I hope you'll take those three things and look at the things that we're doing here. And if we can help you press against those things, we'd be excited to help you with it. You can reach us at any of the social medias on the screen, or go to the website and register for the newsletter. Thank you so much for your time. We have a few minutes for questions.
Yeah. We are here.
So you all know what you're going to do next, right?
Yeah,
Sir.
sure.
So it seems to me that these large-scale emergency only happen so often, and when it does, it falls on volunteer organizations. So I'm wondering, we also have like our 911 emergency services, but they only use voice communication. Is there somewhere to bridge that? Because they probably want to move up the scale and to also be able to enlist community or citizens that are actually present on the scene of an accident. And that happens all the time, and it's a public responsibility, and sort of that those worlds could kind of connect, that all those kinds of emergencies are small-scale Sierra Leones, and in that sense that you also say that the challenge is to gather relevant evidence and usage of the software. Is that a way that you could get more traction to this?
Yeah, I can answer. So, so first of all, we want a system that can be used by communities which is in risk of potential outbreaks. So, which meaning that they have recurrent outbreaks of different diseases. We want to do this, so that is for me the link. So you have a system there that is ongoing, which can be hibernated when it's not an epidemic season, because it's epidemic seasons every year. But then it can be re-established when we're entering into that epidemic season. This is what I'm talking about. I'm not, so, and then we will have the same system that can be mobilized in emergency. So while if you have a kind of system to that, you will also have a system which is ready to be. It's already been used by the national society in that country. So for the I'm not sure if I understood you. If for small scale, medium scale, and large scale disaster, we want a system which can be used in both small, medium, and large scale disasters. So the system that we are looking for is a system that I can use when I'm going to a large outbreak, such as an Ebola epidemic, or to Madagascar, where you have, which is in an seasonal trends, which is like 1 to 2 odd cases every year in a certain area. But suddenly you can have a peak there, and I want to capture that before the peak comes. Because then you can stop it. Did I answer you a little bit, or no?
Well, let me go around a little bit, because what I was thinking is that if you scale that a little bit back, will it become more relevant to not only large scale emergencies that only happen so often, and when it does, it falls upon volunteer organizations?
Just to so everybody knows what you're talking about here as well, there is this idea that we call 911 kind of archaically, who talks on their cell phone? It's so strange. But that's the only way 911 works right now. And in the developed world, it's interesting when you see the technology that's being built to work in a place like Sierra Leone and Madagascar, thinking, well, we don't even have that here. And I think that might be something you're getting at. I am aware of some other open source projects, not necessarily HTBox projects, that one of them is called City Pulse, where they are trying to use bot type technology and text messaging or Facebook Messenger, those kinds of tools, so that a city can have a conversation with its citizens. And so that, yes, when you have a moment like there's been a car accident, here's a photo, and that can be rapidly disseminated to medical professionals and emergency responders. Although, and be aware, a side effect of a developed nation is also rules around how responses can be pulled in, what information is available. It is very tricky, for example, to send a photograph to a police department. There are very strict rules of evidence on how they're supposed to receive that kind of information. And so citizen responders can complicate the ability for police to do their work. That being said, being able to say there's an incident, or more relevantly, when you start looking at one of the magic parts of the piece of software that the Norwegian Red Cross is using, is being able to see where an epidemic is building up. So when you start seeing geographically multiple incidences, that many people are complaining about a problem with water or a problem with flu or any of those sorts of things, even in a developed city, that healthcare workers can see there might be a problem in this particular geography. So picking up on the social media gestalt, the energy around comments in social media geographically bound, allows a city to respond more quickly. So I do see that software starting to form that will be available here as much as in a place like Sierra Leone. I think they're different creatures, because that's not so, unless you just look at citizen as volunteer, but when you talk about a cognizant issue like plague in Madagascar, which has large-ranging consequences for their economies, that's why there's a volunteer group there, why the National Society reaches out to the branches to help them with it. A city's natural gauge, I think it'll be funded differently, I think it'll work differently, but I don't disagree with you for a moment that mobile and cloud, those two technologies together, we need to get better to using that routinely in our ways that we communicate with our governments and with our services within our cities.
Actually, follow up on that. I do work with a startup that is actually doing that thing. And it is based upon social, and it's supposed to be kind of a network. and people being able to respond to it. So, but I do see kind of a security aspect of that, because I don't think one entity should really own that data. So this could be something that blockchain could be good for capturing that. So it's not just the kind of services out there, but it's also data governance again. So you mentioned it as well.
Yeah, we have a battle with privacy and following policy, and it's part of the conversation. It's very challenging when you move to different jurisdictions, different countries, different rules. So I think it's part of our effort in building this software to make sure we respect the locality and how they do those things. I don't know if that answered your question.
Yeah, you do. There are different regulatory concerns.
There is, absolutely, and different cultures and how they work with them. I mean, I don't know that Tonje has emphasized quite enough. Like, I worked on the Ebola crisis as well. The sheer amount of fear in the populace around hospitals and government, stuff we would never consider here. It's a very powerful force in other parts of the world. And you will be baffled as a volunteer at the reactions sometimes. And you just have to learn that culture and understand where it comes from. And if you can't get there, you can't help them. So I think it's going to be the same problem with each time we introduce technologies in different communities. You know, we have a problem. We get this stuff, and we're not the majority. Right? We're a small part of our overall society, even in a place as rich and developed as Norway. We're right at the leading edge. We're comfortable with a lot of things that our parents and grandparents won't be. And so we have to be careful as we introduce technology like this anywhere in the world, that we bring it in a way that makes everyone comfortable, at least can understand its value and can mitigate the fear around it. Otherwise, it creates more problems than it solves. Sign me up. Well, if you're going to go with my gig, there we are. But I'm interested in how folks are going to contribute to the Norwegian Red Cross.
Yeah. The thing is that it's really, really early. We were hoping to get the answer by now, but the thing is that we will keep you posted. So follow me on Twitter. I forgot to actually put my thing up, but EINARI, so INRA, for Twitter. I will be sure to actually, try to inform everyone. And I do know a bunch of you in the room, so expect an email. So that's what we're trying right now. Unfortunately,
so our plan is, like as I said in my presentation, is that our goal is to have a global scale up. Thus, we want to have a close cooperation at the global level with Geneva. So we are currently looking at different methodology and exploring different ways, like looking at what you've been doing and finding out a way of doing this best. And we hope that we can be able to do a codathon, which is a new term for me, which I learned yesterday. Maybe this fall already. So please keep in contact with Einar, and we will start moving as quickly as we can.
Yeah, we use the term codathon rather than hackathon because I think hackathon has a bunch of connotations now, especially in the US. They've been doing these coding competitions they call hackathons, and often when you use that term, you get that kind of behavior where a bunch of people want to compete against each other to write against a common API or a common set of tools and win a prize. And that's not what we're about at HTBox, and I don't think it's what the Norwegian Red Cross wants to do either. I call it codathon more like a marathon in the sense that we have a long way to go, and if you can help us take a few steps in that direction, we'd appreciate it.
So I just put my contact details, I think. So if you want more information, please feel free to contact me. Obviously, you also had the slide with your contact information. Maybe we should, if anyone's taking notes, so reach us, and there we go as well. So, well, you're not seeing that. So, yeah, but
looks great for you.
Yeah, it looks awesome at my. So let me actually pull that over. Sorry about that. There we go. So please reach out. That's what we have to say about this today, and hopefully we'll get to the whole community thing, and we'll get this show on the road. Yeah.
What if this software already exists? Do you have to build a new structure as a lot of software already?
Oh yeah, sure. And it's very, obviously we need to keep it kind of track on this, and obviously the stuff that they've been doing over at HD Box as well is already something that I've looked into, and it's something that some of it can be reused for this project. So we need to keep our eyes and ears open, and if anyone knows about anything, obviously give us a shout out, because we don't, that's the whole thing. As long as we can guarantee the quality, as long as we can maintain it, and as long as we can get it out to the field, working with this, it doesn't really matter who built it, or actually it doesn't really matter how we built it even, as long as it works.
I would love to hear about that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but it's because we've done a lot of searching to try to find it, and my colleague is now deployed. Actually, so Anine is in Africa in a large cholera outbreak there now, and I talked to her last night, and she said like, "Oh my God, I just wish we had this, because now they're using something called COBO there now, and then they have been on Magpie, they've been on ODK, they've been on several different, but we haven't really found that actual interaction with the volunteers yet. But maybe you have it. Please contact me and give it to me."
And it's one of the reasons we're working in open source for an HD Box as well, is we're trying our best not to repeat ourselves. And more than what you'll see, I'll give you a preview of what's going to happen to Humanitarian Toolbox over the next year or so. We're writing less software, and we're taking over other software. That's becoming a big piece. There's software that has been built inside of different organizations that they need to sustain, that they want to grow further, and that they would prefer not to repeat themselves, that we don't have to keep writing the same thing over and over again. And so we're helping to put that software in a place, in a foundation, in an organization, so that anybody who needs it can use it. You know, one of the advantages of that the HD Box software living on GitHub is you don't need my permission to use it. You don't even have to tell me. Just fork it. Go crazy. Enjoy. The installation notes are there. If you want our help, we can help you as well. And if you want to contribute, well, there's a pattern for how to contribute that involves conversation first and code second, so that we work on the right things. But I'm with you, sir, that I would rather we gave this stuff away and that we wrote it all once. It's never going to be that clean or perfect. And there's many different kinds of organizations out there, and they work in different ways. We're trying to find our way forward and help each other as best as we can.
So just to follow up on that, so what we do in our community, like in the Red Cross, so we have global meetings that we share, like what the different national societies is doing. So I know, for example, next month I'm going to Nairobi to have a regional meeting with the African National Society, who is currently involved in community-based surveillance. At this point of time, mostly are using papers, and someone also using WhatsApp to notify about potential outbreak. But what we have trying to develop is applying epidemiological methods to create more an early action. Yeah, I'm not sure if you're on that. Yeah. So we do have we do talk together with many national. We also had a global meeting in Geneva in November, where also different national societies shared what we're doing, but we haven't really found it yet. Yeah, thanks.
Okay. Time for one more, sir.
How are you going to test the software?
Test the software? Well, we need automated tests, right? So we need automated tests on multiple levels to do that. So anything from a unit level to actually on an integration level as well. And also test the UI. So we're going to have to do that. And it needs to be automated, because they're not going to sit there and have time to actually test this. They're out in the field. They're just going to have to trust that it works. So we're going to have to do that for them. So we need some kind of guidelines around that. And my experience in doing open source for the last 15 years, I'm pretty familiar with doing those guidelines and saying this is what you need to do to be contributing to this project. And also that's why we have the gated check-ins. The gated check-ins also build, right? So the gated check-ins will automatically build, run the tests, and make sure you didn't break anything. So, and also have kind of code reviews in place as well. So at least one other person looked at the code, right? So that's what I'm kind of thinking of. But again, it's going to be, well, we're hoping it's going to be built in the open, and that means also the kind of governance that we come up with is something that we do together. It's not something that I come up with or anything like that. These are my suggestions, right, basically for now.
In our experience in working with different disaster relief organizations over in HT Box, there are trials. So in the United States, the FEMA organization runs disaster response events, where they will simulate an earthquake in Los Angeles, which all too often is not a simulation. And it allows the relief workers to practice, to move their equipment, make sure communication works and so forth. And it is an opportunity, if you've followed the process, to have some of your software tested as well. Relief workers have a very high bar. The usual comment I have for them is, you have to demonstrate to me that this beats pen and paper, because I love the battery life of paper. But it's a good challenge. My frustration, because we come from software where we're used to iterating really quickly, is they only run 2 or 3 of them a year. And so we have a big build up to those events, and then we get our butts handed to us, as all good testing does, and then we go get better. It's fun when you can work with an organization like the Red Cross on different projects where we can iterate faster, because we're dealing with the people who will use it on a routine basis, and they will iterate with us quickly. But in larger responses, it's at a slower pace. And I'd rather be right than fast in those scenarios, so we go through that process.
Okay. I think our time is up.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.